Hi everyone, and excuse my voice first of all, but welcome to our live stream. Evening live stream now for a bit of a change. Nice to be able to do that. And welcome to all those in various parts of the world where you may be at the end of your day, or the beginning of your day, or in the middle of your day. Welcome to you all. Great to be here and looking forward to getting your questions and comments. No real news since we last spoke, well, since I last got behind the camera with Cameron Stroke, the Hungarian Grand Prix. Other than that, Pirelli have stayed on in Hungary and have been doing some testing there. Quite interestingly, with some slightly narrower front and rear tyres for 2026. Same big diameter, 18-inch diameter tyres, but slightly narrower front and rear. So interesting to see that. Can't read anything into lap times, of course, because they're using old cars. Although I suppose the only interesting thing, not significant thing, not interesting, significant, and actually quite sad thing is that Alpine ran Paul Aron, and I think they're going to run Colapinto again tomorrow, which, you know, if they're going to run Jack Doohan, who is their third driver, who should be in that car really, as he was contracted to be at the start of the year, then it would have been at a test like this, wouldn't it? So it's looking less and less likely, more and more difficult, let's put it that way. But anyway, still out there pushing for Jack to get that drive and be given another opportunity, because he's definitely better than the treatment he's been given at the moment, I think. So there we are. I think with no more ado, because this isn't going to be the longest of live streams I've ever done in my life. We have actually got another function going on tonight, which I need to get on with. But nonetheless, have a little bit of time, some good time, at least an hour or so, if not more. The one thing I would say is to apologize yet again for not getting to questions and comments at the bottom of our chat box, because we just get so many people coming in early and asking questions and banking up, getting in foot in the door, as it were, and there's no real way around that. I'm just trying to think of perhaps ways we can expand the whole live stream, maybe do more, maybe get around opportunity to get everybody out there, but at the moment I'm just going to have to sort of do what we do, and one of the problems is my chat box that I use only has about 5 questions on it, so it's not as if I can scroll down to the bottom anyway. It's just the way to, if you want to have what I have, which is this, I hope, quite nice system of having the question on the screen like that, then that's one of the limitations. Anyway, we're working on all of that. None of that's really of interest to you guys. Let's get on with it. Lee Kambanga, who is another regular. Thank you very much, Lee, for joining us. Hi, Peter. When the drivers say the tyres are hot, especially saying right front, how do they tell? Is it because the car will be sliding, or can they feel the heat from the cockpit? Are there sensors? Yeah, there are sensors. And it's not always the left front. Well, it can be the left front or the right front. Most circuits have more right-handers than left-handers, so it's usually the left front that goes, but equally there always are, you know, the alternative, but it's the loaded front. And sometimes it's the loaded rear that gets it as well on some tracks, but it's the loaded front that gets most of the punishment. And they are feeling it. If the tyres get hot, they will for sure lose grip. And then beyond that, they can see that on sensors in the garage anyway. So in the old days, the team, I think it was David Coulthard won the Monaco Grand Prix when they did a pits to car robotic control, if you like, without David having to do anything, and they just changed the mixture of the engine when you had a slight engine problem. Now they have to tell the driver what to do. I mean, it's a bit semantic, isn't it? But that's what they have to do. But they can always say, yeah, temperatures are hot, and you hear it on the formation lap, the preparation laps. Temperatures are good, a little bit cold here, but, you know, things like that. In fact, I was listening to Max's radio in Spa in Q3, and they said halfway around the Spa lap, temperatures colder than they were on your previous preparation lap, Max, get the speed up, things like that. So yeah, you know, that's what they do. And drivers, it's not a difficult thing to manage in preparation laps. It's a more difficult thing to manage in the race if you're under pressure, or there are other dramas going on with the car, you're not quick, whatever it is. So yeah, a lot can still happen there. Right, seem to have lost this famous chat box now. Let's put it down here. Get back to square one. Bear with me. Here we go. Right, second one. Leave again. Yeah. If maybe I should say, you know, only ask 1 or 2 questions up front, because if you put sort of 5 or 6 in, which I think we had the other day, then it does make it quite difficult for me to get down to the bottom. And again, apologies for my throat. It's a bit rough. Talking too much for sure. Windsor again. No, that's a slight thing. I'm taking these things. Not quite sure. Buco Metasana. highly recommended here in Spain. Actually, very nice pills, but I don't know if they're doing any good or not. Lee says, I know you say it's good for Max to stay at Red Bull in 26 because no one knows who's going to be fast, but I really think even if the engine is good, the car will be bad. Car development is terrible. Oh, it doesn't say much for our friends at Red Bull, does it? In the technical department, the engineering department there. Give them a break. I mean, they have won a few Grand Prix this year, haven't they? They're not that bad. They're just not very good at the moment, obviously on circuits with lots of slow corners and traction and getting both front and the rear of the car to work. But show them a circuit with a reasonable number of medium high-speed corners. Well, medium, they don't have that many high-speed corners anyway, but medium speed corners, and it will be half reasonable, half-reasonable. They can't do much during the August break. The whole point is that they actually have a break. But there's still a long way to go, and I'm not being sort of, oh, well, let's hope for the best. But it'd be astonishing if Red Bull stay where they were in Hungary for the rest of the year. I just don't believe that's going to happen. On that subject, Mercedes, much better than Red Bull, obviously, in Hungary, and markedly better than they effectively were at Spa. And they did actually, as George said before the Hungarian Grand Prix, they're going back to their previous rear suspension layout. And I was just looking at what that was, actually. I can only imagine that it was at the Belgian Grand Prix. They moved the drum lip inboard, which is basically part of it's the cooling system for the brakes, but it also has another function of heating the wheel and the tyres, and through that you can do a lot of tyre control. And it's also an aerodynamic thing as well. And at the time they said this creates more outwash, improved rear tyre wake control. And I did say at the time, rather cynically, it's like reading a menu on a restaurant, isn't it? All these meals sound absolutely perfect the way they're worded. Improved weight control. Well, quite obviously it wasn't improved weight control, or if it was improved weight control, it had a detrimental effect on another part of the back of the car. I would assume that this is what they've got rid of, and they're going back to square one on that, because the previous race, the British Grand Prix, they didn't do anything to do with the suspension. Nothing in the British Grand Prix. The Austrian Grand Prix, they didn't have any suspension updates. And the previous race, they won anyway. So I think it all comes back to the whole Ron Taranaki thing, doesn't it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they just won the Canadian Grand Prix. Anyway, here they are, I guess, going back with the old drum lip. And it's now outboard. Would that probably be the case? I think so. Anyway, all that. Yeah, there you go. I'm saying Shay James, it's probably Jez James actually. Probably Jeremy James. Hi Peter, have you ever seen C'est un Rendezvous, 76 short film by Claude Lelouch? Any thoughts if so? Are we talking about the Johnny Sebas Gabin film? I think that was produced by or directed by Claude Lelouch, who of course did Man and a Woman and Vivre pour Vivre. And I have seen it, and it was Johnny Sebas Gabin, if it's the one we're thinking of. Really good. You wouldn't be allowed to make films like that today, would you? It's basically about setting a lap record on the Périphérique of Paris. And a lot of the French drivers and journalists and photographers at that time, notably Manu Zerini, one of my best friends in those days, great sculptor too, great photographer, and of course Johnny, who I never knew. I never was around when he was at his peak, but I did actually chat to him at Goodwood a couple of times and asked him about that, and he sort of went, yes, formidable. So that was great, yeah. But I love all those Claude Lelouch films. If you haven't seen Un homme et une femme, A Man and a Woman, you must see it. It captures a lot of the mid-60s, early mid-60s, but it also captures what motorsport was like then. I mean, he drives around in a Mustang for a start, and then he's got the Monte Carlo Rally. He's a rally driver, and he drives a GT350 Mustang in the Monte Carlo Rally. But he also goes to this test day at Montlhéry on the outskirts of Paris and drives what looks to be a Formula Junior Brabham and a GT40 on the banking and so forth. And he's got all the Ford France kit on. It's Jean-Paul Belmondo, of course, the father of Paul Belmondo, who actually got quite high up the motorsport ranks at one point. He wasn't a bad driver at all. The whole film is brilliant, made by Anouk Aimée, who is one of the all-time great actresses, in my opinion. I haven't really thought much about her as an actor as such, but she sure looked the part, that is for sure. Anyway, there you go. Sarosh Soman. I think you're the guilty party, Sarosh. So many questions up front. You're going to have to limit that, mate. Hi, Peter. I felt sad for Leclerc. Drove so well right from the start. Ferrari says that something broke in the chassis owing to which he was having the handling issues. Well, yeah, you know, did it? He still finished fourth. I suspect it was something to do with the floor. He's probably running pretty low, as they all do. And they probably panicked halfway through the race that he was possibly going to be illegal, which is why they did what they did. But again, nothing new there. Most of the teams have those sorts of problems at various stages of the season. Ferrari, like everybody, trying to run as low as possible. But as I said, to me, it looked to me like he was just losing traction. And that would be a floor thing, of course. Maybe a bit too much curb. And that was it. Something broke. Yeah, you know, probably lost downforce at the rear, I would say. And I think George Russell, I think, suggested that maybe they put tyres on the car with slightly higher tyre pressures to sort of make sure it was a little bit higher at the end of the race. None of which impressed Charles, of course, who was saying, I could have driven around the problem. I'm not sure if he, you know, the cold light of Monday morning, he still thought that. But knowing Charles, he probably could have. But I was looking at apropos this, really, I was looking at shots of Charles on his pole lap going through turn 6-7, which is the right-left chicane section at the top, the slow chicane, comparing it with Oscar Piastri to see, because he was so much quicker there, to see why that was. And Oscar goes into 6 and he's just got understeer, and he kind of only uses about that much curb on the apex of 6, and then as a result he's really got to get the car changing direction for 7, and he gets a reasonable amount of curb, but not much. Whereas Charles goes into 6 already looking at the exit of 7, and he just goes boom, boom like that, and he takes about that much curb on the apex of 7, and the car's just in a straight line. But I think he was doing that most of the time. It's pretty cool stuff from Charles. No, you know, but I think that showed the McLaren was affected much more with understeer with that wind that came up. Got a super chat here, so we'll do that. F1, this is from Paulo Souza, another of our regulars. Hi, Paulo. Thank you very much for your super chat. Very kind. F1 should have fixed cameras at certain corners to compare drivers' different styles. I would love for you to have drivers in your pocket on your podcast describe their driving style. Well, I agree with you about the fixed cameras, because the whole drama of actually watching what a driver is doing is kind of ruined when they pan with the driver or they're on board or whatever. What you want is a fixed camera, and you want to be able to see what they're doing going into a corner. We sometimes get glimpses of that from the drone shots, which are not bad, but not quite the same. And bear in mind that the great drivers, sort of top third of the field, if you like, are all driving on feel more than they are driving on trajectory, and how incredibly difficult it is to actually get to the bottom of the feel of what makes a driver rotate the car at this point or that point, because they're all just doing it naturally. Then yeah, we need all the ammunition we can get, and those sorts of cameras might help. But I don't think that'll ever happen, because as we know, the reason, one of the ways Formula One distinguishes itself from other sports is to have its own TV production for every race, and it's the same company, the same team that do every race. It's owned by Liberty, and they've got other priorities. You know, actually distinguishing between driving styles is probably about the bottom of their priorities. Giving the sponsors good value for money and making the race look as exciting as an F1 movie are their two top priorities, I would say. And none of that would involve fixed cameras. It would involve the opposite, indeed. So yeah, you know, I hear what you say, but it ain't going to happen. In terms of podcasts and drivers talking, as I've mentioned a few times, and I just repeat it, and I've just touched on it there, you know, it is all about feel. If you were to say to Charles, how do you think you drive compared with Oscar Piastri? Or could you tell us how you drive, Charles? Let's not compare it with anybody else, which is kind of what you're saying. He would say, oh, well, you know, I like to win. I like to get in the corner, have the front. Sorry, I better not do the accent. Sorry. I like to get in the car with the front end really good, really plugged. Give me a good front end and tires that last forever, and I'm a happy boy. I obviously like to have a good rear, because when I do want to rotate the car, turn the car is probably what he'll say. I want to make sure that the back knows what it's doing. And what else would he say? I want it to be very fast in a straight line. I want great traction. That's what he would say. He would never go into detail, partly because I don't think, if I said to Charles, it's interesting how you turn in on this corner, we've measured it, you're turning in 8 centimeters earlier than Lewis. Why would that be, Charles? I think he would say, oh, it was just one corner. I don't know. I'm probably the same as Lewis. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think, what I'm getting around to saying is I don't think any of the drivers, and this applies not only to the current era, but any driver, whether it be Fangio, Clark, Moss, Andretti, whatever, I don't believe that they actually know in very precise detail how they drive. I don't think they want to know. I think they do everything so much by feel, by weight management of the car. That's what it's all about. It's all about managing the dynamic weight, as I keep saying, and weight transfer. Weight transfer is another word for it. And, well, weight transfer, dynamic weight. Yes, basically we're talking about the same thing. And the reality is that everybody is different anyway. And if you take, for example, both Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, who are obviously driving the same car, and they both have quite wide approaches. Some corners Oscar's a little bit earlier than Lando, but not many. He used to be earlier in his first year. He's now found a sort of, for him, a nice manageable sweet spot. And for me, this is my eye, it's only my opinion, but I would say that Oscar's got unbelievably fast hands, and he is able, and he has much more confidence of handling whatever the car's going to do when he starts to put steering into it than Lando, because he's just got faster hands and he's got that confidence of knowing that he's going to be able to just catch it, no problem at all. And because he's got that, he's able to combine, if you like, he's able to combine quite a fast weight transfer with a wide entry into the corner. So he's really good at speeding up the weight transfer. Lando, for me, is a completely different sort of driver. He's much more, everything happens slowly for Lando, and I don't think he's ever on the limit that much. I think he's on the limit a little bit, but nothing like as much as Oscar. And his way of driving is always just to wait for the moment when he knows he can rotate the car. That's what he does, and he does that very well with no brakes or throttle quite often, whereas Oscar very rarely is out of both pedals. He's either on the brakes or he's on the throttle. Whereas Lando's a very different sort of driver like that. And for me, Lando is he's a much calmer driver, probably. And, well, not probably, he is a much calmer driver. And he's just driving on feel, again, quite a wide turn-in, but everything is just brought down to the slowest way he can do it. When I say slow, I mean slow inside his brain. I don't mean slow in terms of lap time. And I think, for me, Lando has more feel, if you like, than Oscar. It's quite a big thing to say, and please don't take it out of context. But Oscar has got these incredibly quick hands and probably great footwork. I haven't seen enough to be able to say that his footwork is up there with, say, George and Fernando, but I think it probably is, or Max or Charles. I think it probably is. And between Charles and Max, not a lot of difference. Very similar in the way they're able to create short corners and manage the dynamic weight while they've got load going into the corner. The only thing I'd say there is that basically Charles does the same thing as Max, but probably his pulse rate's about 30 beats a second higher, I imagine, while he's doing it. Because he's just a more emotional guy, whereas Max is the epitome of perfection, really. I think he just does it perfectly, and he's very calm while he's doing it. And great hands, great feet, great everything. Anyway, thanks for that question, Paolo. Good question. Well, it led on to a lot anyway, didn't it? Another one, Sarosh. How many are we going to answer of yours today, Sarosh? Peter, the pole lap in comparison to Piastri was full of short corners, except turn 2, where both of them understeered owing to wind. Astonished as to how Leclerc, Verstappen can turn in so well even with low downforce setups. Well, they were running, compared with Silverstone, it was a high downforce setup. Compared with Spa, it was a high downforce setup. It's all relative, of course. And, Piastri, well observed. He did have that understeer. Turn 2, he said he was full of short corners. I'm not sure he was. I was trying to think to me, the best looking corner for Piastri was probably turn 5. I think he did a really nice job on 5 there, got in quite early and was just very neat through 5. 2 is a different story because it's a bit like the hairpin at Suzuka. You very rarely see anybody taking the geometric racing line through that hairpin because there's a lot of grip in the middle of the corner, and that means that everybody can sort of break a little bit into the middle of the road, extend the straight, shorten the corner. And the wide entry merchants like Sainz and Lawson, and to some extent the 2 McLaren drivers, probably aren't thinking, wow, this is good, maybe I can try to create this in other places. They just do it because it's quicker. And I think it's the same with turn 2 at Hungary. I think there's more grip in the middle, and we heard McLaren confirming that. I don't think that was an understeer thing. I think it was just that was what they were doing. And it helps you when you come out because then you don't have to do such a big deal getting over to the left with a weight transfer for the next right kink there. Unlike, for example, the exit from turn 2 in Barcelona, where everybody does do that. They come out and they're very wide and then they go way over to the left. Well, the long corner merchants do anyway. So, and you're astonished how Leclerc, Verstappen can turn in even early with load. Well, yeah, that's because of what I just said. It's all to do with the footwork and the handwork and how they're managing the car with lateral load. It's what they do. That is what they do, you know. Bakers make bread. That is what Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen do. They manage cars with dynamic weight, lateral dynamic weight, and they are doing that all the time. So whether or not they've suddenly got wind coming in or something else, oil, whatever, on the track, yeah, it's all part of managing it, isn't it? Whereas guys like, say, Lawson have a sort of fixed line, and if something interferes with that, or they've got too much load, there's not much they can do. It's just boom, like that, and they just correct it if they can. Not always. So Rosh is actually, he's retracted his next 3 questions. So Rosh, I was only joking. Well, I was kind of half joking. That's very kind of you to do that, mate. Get everybody some space. But equally, you didn't have to do that. I'm very touched. Thank you. Aaron Lee, another Regan. Hi, Aaron. What is the ideal solution to reduce spray? Less ground effect? Deflectors of some kind? The wheel cover trial didn't seem effective. It seems like a major issue with wet running these days. Yeah, it's a good point, because it's not only the standing water they hit that and suddenly they go sideways on the straight that they're all concerned about, and which is foremost in the minds of the race director when he's deciding whether to hold up the race start for an hour or so. It's also, as you say, spray and how it works on various circuits. It's worse at some tracks than others because of trees both sides or other things, grandstands, whatever. Rallying being one of my hobbies, watching the WRC and what was going on, and Rally of Finland, brilliant win for Kalle, so happy for him. Equally, heart really went out to Terry, easy P2, and then he's going down the middle of the road just to make sure everything's safe because the hard work's all done, and gets a puncture. I think it's something like the 12th puncture he's had in 2 rallies, something like that. Unbelievable. Anyway, getting back to it. Again, the point I was making was I never used to be a mud flaps guy. When I grew up in Australia, if we saw an EH Holden with mud flaps, you'd go, oh no, he's got mud flaps on the car, isn't that terrible? Usually the same drivers that would have bobbles around the rear windscreen and a fake foxtail on the top of the aerial, and then it had mud flaps as well. And usually one of those wind guard things when you have your elbow out the door when you're driving, it has a wind guard on it. I don't think they probably sell those anymore because you're probably not allowed to put your arm out the window at all. Anyway, so I was never into mud flaps, but having watched a lot of rallies now, I'm totally into mud flaps. They look so cool on the cars. Guess he's going to get mud flaps soon on his i20N. Would they work? I don't know, probably they would. Yeah, I think everyone would say, oh, they look terrible flapping around at the back of the car. Can't have that. And then you've got to have cycle guards, and that would be just enclosed wheels, so we can't have that. And then it'll say, oh, well, Pirelli, you can fix the problem. It's not only the tyres, of course, it's also the diffuser and the way the spray is going under the car and being diffused out the back of the car. And that means, new technical regulations for the wet. I mean, your question sends a shudder down my spine because it makes me think another reason they'll probably ban all racing in the wet within 5 years or something like that. I'm not sure there is a solution. Short of saying no downforce on the cars and everybody must run treaded tyres and be able to have tyres that can run in the wet and the dry, and no pit stops for tyres, short of saying that, which will never happen, then I don't see a solution really. It's a shame. Aaron, second question, some out of the box ideas. Permeable pavement, brighter lights, forward and rear facing. Yes, permeable pavement. Quite difficult to get all the circuit owners of the world to repave everything with some sort of permeable surface, but unbelievably costly, stroke time consuming, and who knows how it would work in very, very high temperatures as well in the dry. Not sure. I think they're probably running the best possible surfaces they can get now, I would imagine. I haven't really gone into it recently. I remember when Dunlop Delu-Grip was used to resurface Silverstone back in probably the 70s now. I think it was the first race in the wet, that one Keke Rosberg won in 75. And all the Goodyear people complained because they thought Dunlop had, used a special compound to mess around with the Goodyear tyres. Not that anyone was running Dunlop tyres then, but they just thought, well, because of the old competition, that's probably not very good. So lights, is there a problem with lights? In the wet, they work quite well, don't they? All those red lights. I don't think we want forward-facing lights. Imagine the bright lights in the mirrors, LED bars in the front, like the rally cars. Let's just all go rallying. If we want wet weather, we want to see wet racing, just go and watch WRC. They don't worry about it. Fog, snow, hail, ice, rain, they're out there. Formula One, yeah, well, they're very specialised, aren't they? Bramwell says, Fernando's new moustache is very mega rega. We're talking about Clay Regazzoni there. And haven't scrutinised it particularly closely for obvious reasons, but yeah, I think, he's always been a bit different, hasn't he, Fernando, with the old appearance, I suppose is the right word. The grooming is the right word, I guess. And yeah, he's not going the beard. Well, he's gone the beard route, but moustache, I think, is. Oh, who started all that? Valtteri started all that moustache business, didn't he? Graham Hill, Nigel Mansell, Clay Regazzoni. Yeah, lots of them. Fernando's moustache, very rega. I miss Clay Regazzoni. Great guy. He's such a cool dude. We as the English press didn't speak to him that much because his English wasn't brilliant, but he obviously spoke French, and I think he spoke obviously Italian. I think he spoke French and a bit of German, being from up in the north there on the border. And what a guy. He's a very fast racing driver. Brilliant in Formula 2 and that techno. And he was good in Formula 1. And, that win in 70 at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza was just one of the greatest events in Italy, sporting events in Italy of all time. And I've got some stories to tell about Rega, but not many of them, well, none of them actually are repeatable on this live stream. So I think we'll move swiftly on from that one. Perpetually biased. That's another regular. I love that. I've said it before, but the great British journalist Dennis Jenkinson once gave me this going over the coals of being far too neutral, and a good journalist is always biased and always expresses his opinion, even if you're writing an objective race report. I was a bit unsettled by all of that. Perpetually biased. Good evening, Peter. Thanks for another show. Why did Max decide to clarify now where he'll be for 26? He could have shut down the rumours at once, but instead give vague answers for months. Sorry, where are we? As soon as I tried to go to your next question, it jumped away. Okay. The journalists are just doing their jobs, and he accuses them of stirring the pot since he's being quiet and focused. How hard is it to squash rumours? Why does he feel the need to act patronising? I don't think he's patronising. I just think it's just like, it's nobody's business what he's doing. If he can tell people when he's re-signed or decided to stay with Red Bull or not. It's his thing. Nobody is privy to how much he's earning or how long that contract is. If he wants to tell them, great. Just because a journalist asks, it doesn't mean to say that's the journalist's job. Instead of asking him about, wow, why were you braking here, or what did it feel like when the inside front locked, was that something you were on? A technical question that I'm sure he would love to talk about. They're asking him stuff about private information to do with his retainer and money. So actually I don't agree with you. I don't think the journalist are entitled to that, and I don't think they are necessarily doing their job if they're asking information about private contracts and so forth. I'm being a bit over the top there, because you could say, well, it's in the public interest to know if Max Verstappen is staying with Red Bull or not. Well, it may be in their interest, but it may not be in Max's interest at that specific moment. He might have had some ulterior motive not to want to tell people about that until the moment he did. And if that's his privilege, why not? What's the problem? I don't believe journalists are entitled to anything, actually, but maybe I'm of an older generation, but I just don't get this. The journalists are entitled to know. The public has to know. Of course, if you're in the public eye, you have to be aware that you're going to be asked stupid questions, but at the same time, you don't have to respond to them. And I think Max has been totally okay on that. So there you go. Gixa Squid, that's an interesting name. Peter, apologise if you addressed this already. Do you anticipate papaya rules may lead to either driver's departure from the team? I think this year's winner may reflect back. Well, I mean, that's what you're saying is, obviously the racing between Lando and Oscar, whatever that rule is, I'm still not quite sure what Zach's master plan is. I've got to say, I've been congratulating him recently because they haven't taken one another out, to my astonishment. But what are the rules? The rules are, I've got to say, I think McLaren did a pretty good job in Hungary of letting the two of them race. And it was a pretty open race to the finish. And bearing in mind what happened last year, catastrophe of last year, all credit to them for allowing it to be a proper race and allowing Oscar to have a go at passing Lando. And Lando out there in front, even though he'd been out-qualified by Oscar or whatever, and maybe lucked into the one-stop strategy. Maybe there was an argument for saying, oh, well, he was just lucky. They should let Oscar win the race or whatever. I don't know. They didn't go for that either. They just said, right, we're going to race. Try not to crash into one another, or don't crash into one another. Again, quite what that means, I don't know. So I think, if Lando was going to leave, surely he would have left a year after Oscar joined, when he had an option to leave, but instead of which he signed a new long-term contract. So Lando obviously would prefer, I imagine, to have somebody slightly less dramatic in the other car, dramatically quick, and therefore has accepted that, and he's going racing, putting himself under a massive amount of pressure as a result, even though you could argue he's done quite a lot of the work at McLaren to take them up to where they are. And Oscar, for his part, thinks, I love McLaren, it's a great team, great car. On my best days, on a good day, I can beat Lando. I'm bound to win more Grand Prix. With luck, I'll win a championship. I can't see him leaving either. So I think they'll stay where they are. And I can't imagine now, after all this time, McLaren, even if they have a massive coming together and they both take one another out in an upcoming Grand Prix and give the win to Ferrari or Max or whoever, or George Russell, I can't imagine McLaren would say, right, that's it. We failed in our decision. We made a massive mistake in hiring Oscar because it's too much pressure on Lando, and Lando and Oscar don't go together in a team. We're going to fire one of them. We'll announce in 3 weeks which one it's going to be. I just can't imagine McLaren would ever do that. So they're just going to continue where they are, I think. Speaking of that, though, and just going back to sorry, I hope I haven't pulled a plug out there. Going back to the differences in style and characteristics between Oscar and Lando, I would never, if I was a team owner, and I had, say, Charles, I'd never put Max with Charles, because you got two guys doing basically the same thing. It would be a nightmare. And actually, I would put Lando rather than Oscar with Charles, because you've got two extremes of operation, and Lando's a much calmer driver, I think, in that respect. So, it's interesting, isn't it? Andy Lemaire, first time attending the stream. Looking forward to it, Peter. Thank you very much, Andy. Well, that was obviously before the stream started. Now it's started. You're quite welcome to come back and say what a load of old rubbish this is. And the second question, the concerning Verstappen, maybe it wasn't certain yet until now. Well, any journalist with a brain would have said all along, for sure he's going to stay at Red Bull, because why would he leave when he doesn't know what the cars and the engines are going to be like? And where would he go anyway that would be better than what he's got, bearing in mind all the question marks? If it was to McLaren, yeah, probably he would take it, but there was no opportunity to go to McLaren. So where else would he go? I mean, as far as I know, not many journalists actually were thinking that way. They're all saying, oh, he's going to go to Mercedes. Toto's talking to him. Well, of course, Toto's talking to him. He's probably under big pressure from his board to talk to him. He's the #1 driver in the world, all that stuff. But as I said to Cameron, Toto's quite capable, I think, and I hope, of saying, well, but don't worry. If we've got a good car, George Russell can easily become as big as Max. If he wins 3 world championships, as big as Max. Of course, it would help if they had Adrian Newey, and that's what they should have been focusing on, but they don't. But they've still got a reasonable car now. So it's all, I don't think, for me, it's not a surprise at all. It's a totally normal thing for Max to have done. David says, I think Max Verstappen showed SLH what high-speed short corners are. Can you drive a high-speed short corner? Yeah, of course you can. But again, I think you've got to. Short corners is something we talk about a lot, and they're very obvious in slow corners, some medium speed corners. Like the last corner in Bahrain, that's sort of annoying. It's not 90 degrees, it's quite tight, and then it sort of opens out, so it's probably about 80 degrees, something like that. You can see under braking there, you can see how Max just comes in a little bit early, and you can see how Liam Lawson just stays a little bit longer, and Oscar and Max stay a little bit longer before they just get the weight transfer, feel the weight transfer. Oscar sooner than Lando. But Max is already in there, and he's got the weight transfer already in his touch, and he knows exactly when he's going to rotate the car, as does Charles. But that doesn't mean that is the only thing, a shorter corner. On a fast corner, there may not be a way of doing that. It may be kind of a line lock thing where there is only one thing you can do. The bank corner coming up at Zandvoort, probably quite a good example. But nonetheless, a guy like Max, compared with, say, a guy like Yuki Tsunoda, is going to be able to use some of the repertoire that he has with which he creates short corners, even on fast corners. And it could well be his initial steering input. It could well be, if it requires braking or left foot braking, it could well be the way he's modulating the brake pedal pressure. All those things that he uses when he's creating a short corner on a slow corner, he nonetheless he has them there at his facility on faster corners as well. And that's why he's very good through Copse Corner at Silverstone. It is flat, but he loses fewer revs through Copse than Yuki Tsunoda, even though he's flat through there. Just through the way he can feel at what moment the weight transfer is going to load the tyres, and he's going to minimize that moment of load, even though he's flat. And that's the difference, even on fast corners. But you won't necessarily see that on television. You won't see that on the big screen in terms of difference in line. What you will see, actually, is, and Copse again is a good example, if they got the head-on camera there not moving, is you'll see his initial transition is almost seamless. It's like he's going in a straight line, and now he's turning in, and it's just gone vroom like that. Whereas other drivers will be like that, and you'll see a slight bump as they're going in, Fernando particularly. But don't give him a hard time, because he then makes up for it with this exquisite footwork that he has and this George Russell-like car, feel for the car sitting on the road, which is a different thing to what Max has. So, yeah, for fast corners, definitely you can see it, but you got to look for different things. Vivek Rao says, how do you post questions for Peter? Well, you just have. That's exactly how you do it, Vivek. Thank you. Yeah, SLH. What is SLH? I should know. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Andy. Somebody should answer that. Tick Short Snap says, hi, Peter. I think this weekend showed that Leclerc is with Max, best driver in today's Formula One. On the first 2 stints, he managed Piastri's pace in a slower car. Well, yeah, you're right. Nothing new there. I've been saying that. I hate to say I said this or I said that, but I've been saying that for I don't know what. Certainly, I remember talking about it during COVID, and somebody giving me a hard time saying you can't be serious comparing Charles Leclerc with Max Verstappen. I said, yeah, I'm very serious. Technically, absolutely identical in the way they drive. Brilliant. And the reason, as I said many times, the reason I went all the way once to Italy to Prema when Charles was driving for Prema, and I went to Jerez to watch him clinch the Formula 3 championship, was to see Charles drive. I just could see straight away the guy's just brilliant to watch, just like Nigel. In that sense, very easy to see early on in his career how good he was, and is. Tick Short Snap says, and in qualifying when the track temperature dropped, he set the fastest time. Yeah, and the wind got up as well. I mean, I think it was a double whammy. I think the McLarens lost a little bit of grip because of the cooler temperatures, and Ferrari didn't have to worry quite as much about tyre temperatures. But just as significantly, the wind got up, different direction, and the wind actually apparently helped the front wing of the Ferrari more going into turn 6 and 7 than well, it hurt the McLaren there. Whether it helped the Ferrari, I don't know. But for sure, McLaren had understeer there going in. Vivek Rao says, what can Lewis do to end his downturn in form? Talking to you might be beneficial for him, but do you have his ear? Well, I thought I had his ear, and we have spoken many times. But then during COVID, I was staying in the same hotel as Lewis in Melbourne. And I was sort of walking towards him, and he was walking towards me, and he just blanked me completely. But I think it was because he had his mask on, and he was focused on the gym and not worrying about who this prat was walking the other way. So I won't take it personally, Lewis. No, he's a great guy, Lewis, and had many great chats to him. And I think it's a problem because he's got so much stuff. And there are two Oscars out there, aren't there? There's Oscar Piastri, who's doing an unbelievable job for McLaren against Lando. And then there's the Oscar that Lewis Hamilton might win for his role in the movie. And that is a distraction. For sure it's a distraction. As I said to Cameron, if he had a lot of baggage on his shoulders when he was at Mercedes, imagine what he's got now. Post F1 movie, post Ferrari announcement, he's ginormously big. And how do you stop that affecting the way you think as a pure racing driver? If, as a pure racing driver, you've actually got a few problems that are developed in your style and you need to work on those. How do you continue to be as self-critical as Lewis always was in his early days? You've got so much stuff going on around you. And I said to Cameron, for me, the responsibility for that is Frederic Vasseur, for sure, because he's the team principal. And he also knows Lewis incredibly well from German Formula 3 and then GP3 F2. And so he should have been the guy warning Lewis that all this is going to happen, stripping everything away as much as he could within the realms of Lewis's contractual obligations to the sponsors, and ensuring that he was ready for this guy called Charles Leclerc, who indeed drives just like Lewis up to 2021, and not as Lewis has been driving since 2021. And there should have been a sit-down conversation of, Lewis, you're aware that you're not driving the same way, and I guess that's all to do with the Mercedes and porpoising and bouncing and the car, terrible consistency from one set of tyres to the next, to the front axle to the rear axle, all the things that have been off-putting. But you, as a driver, you've come away a little bit from how you used to be prior to 21 when you had a great car. And I can tell you now, Charles not come away. Even when we've had problems, he's still absolutely brilliant in the way he's turning in and the way he's using the brakes and the throttle, and he's as hungry as a dog. And I want you to be ready for this. And you're going to need to strip off a lot of this stuff. I know the share price has gone up. I know that you're the toast of Italy, the toast of Ferrari, the toast of North America. But you're going to have to get rid of all that stuff from your brain and just become a pure and simple racing driver again. And not think about the money. Don't think about anything. Just be a hard, hungry racing driver. Did Freddie Vasseur have that conversation with him? And if he did, was he watching him on a daily basis to make sure, excuse me, I'm just going to have another Buca Mentasana pill. Throat's getting a bit rough again. And did he monitor him on a daily basis to make sure that was happening? And did he create situations to make it easier for Lewis to go down that road? In other words, opportunities to come to the factory and just have lunch with the mechanics rather than, do what he might be doing somewhere else. Did he do all that? I don't know. I suspect he didn't, because the results, the evidence is that Lewis is in a complete mess now and doesn't know what's going on. He finds it you know, pretty hard to find a geometrical apex from one corner to the other, doesn't he? And I have to blame Freddie for that, because he's the guy that hired him. Yes, I know he probably had pressure from above, but as with all team principals, when they're responsible to larger boardrooms, the job of the team principal is to make sure the boardroom isn't affected by the simplistic thinking of, we've got to have Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, imagine what he'll do for the Ferrari brain. The counterpoint has to be the team principal saying, yeah, but we don't actually need Lewis at the moment. We need Adrian Newey. We need a better car. And we got 2 winning drivers. The other one's called Carlos Sainz. If we got a great car, blah, 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 maybe then we'll get Lewis. But we don't need him right now. Priorities, guys. Did that conversation take? Did Freddie Vasseur say that to, the John Elkans of this world? I don't know. You can't blame John Elkann, because he's got a much higher view of everything, and he'll read what he reads in the press, and his feedback will be it's a fairly sort of superficial feedback of what's going on in the pit lane. Oh yeah, Lewis is brilliant, got to get Lewis, without looking at the detail of how he's actually driving. And that's the problem. They've gone so far down the road now, half a year of not actually basically giving Lewis a pro forma of how to operate within this unbelievable maelstrom of energy that is Ferrari. Much, much more than he's ever experienced in his life. Did anybody prepare him for that? Nobody could prepare Lewis for that, because he's got a massive ego as a result of all the success and who he is, for sure. No doubt about that. That's not a bad thing. I mean, everybody has egos, and some controlled, some are balanced, some are not. But the only person, in my opinion, who could have done anything about that was Freddie, because of his history with Lewis and because he's the team principal anyway. And it didn't happen. That's the really astounding. I still find that absolutely astounding, because when I used to watch ART or ASM doing what they were doing and winning races out of sight, one weekend after another, I was actually in awe of Freddie, partly because he's got this demeanour of being a bit like a bulldog. Don't talk to me, I'm busy. I used to think, wow, this guy's a genius. I won't go near him, I'll just watch him. But I'm kind of disappointed now, because if he's that good, why didn't he have that conversation with Lewis? And I'm assuming he didn't, as I say, because of the evidence that we see now. So this is, the next question from Zishan Afsar is along similar lines, and finishes it by saying, is the politics in Ferrari too much for the championship drivers a la Vettel, Alonso? Well, different. I mean, I think the Vettel thing is quite similar. I think Vettel was very disconcerted by being blown away by Daniel Ricciardo at Red Bull in his last year, and Ferrari offered him a drive, big money, 4 times world champion, go to Maranello, toast of Maranello. He will show the world that he can do what Michael Schumacher did. And yes, he won races, and yes, he did reasonably well, but he wasn't Sebastian Vettel Red Bull spec. And that's because he didn't actually improve his driving. The same things that were there that allowed Daniel Ricciardo to beat him were still there when he was at Ferrari, and that showed up on occasions. And that's where I think his career flatlined. As for Alonso, a different thing completely with Alonso. He's very political, wants everybody around him, and I think at Ferrari he just broke the team apart, basically, by which I mean the Felipe Massa side of the garage. And as he did at McLaren, really, with Lewis. And if it didn't go exactly as he wanted, bang, he was, not going to accept it. I think the mistake Fernando made was to assume that he was going to get a Red Bull drive, and he didn't. And that's why his career then went down. Now it's on the way up, and he could well win the championship next year in an Adrian Newey, Aston Martin. But you've seen this. I mean, it's a bit, what Lewis is doing now is a little bit like Michael going to Mercedes. And, we've seen this sort of thing before. Drivers who achieve a massive amount, and it all changes for whatever reason. And then they go somewhere else, which doesn't really seem right. And you assume on paper it's going to be okay. But these great things, whether it be BAR with $750 million, and Jacques Villeneuve and the new factory and Honda, and they go absolutely nowhere. or whether it's the Vels Pinelli super team. I remember that it was Joe Leonard, Mario Andretti, Al Unser, I think, Viceroy sponsorship, the whole thing, Maurice Philippe design, Indy team, and it was hopeless. had these dihedral sort of outlets, I guess they were, but they were wing shaped on the side. And before the car ran, it was all about, you know, in yaw, these are going to be additional downforce, mega thing. I remember talking to Mario about it. I said, how are those winglets going, Mario, in the yaw? I said, don't talk to me about yaw, man. Oh, I'm not allowed to imitate. Don't talk to me about yaw, man. I don't want to hear that word again. Anyway, there you go. Sheriff of Sanderboat, another regular. Hi, Sheriff. Hi, Peter. The reason I'm sounding odd is I'm sucking one of these Buca Metasanas, as you can see. Hi, Pete. This is from Sheriff of Sanderboat. Hi, Peter. Chapman was a genius, sure, but did his obsession with lightness risk lives? Brilliant cars, yes, but often dangerously fragile. Was it genius or recklessness? Well, in the context of that era, it certainly wasn't recklessness, and he certainly never ever went out to build a car that would fail. But at the same time, in Chapman's mind, and I totally agree with him, and I wish it was still the same today, and I know Gordon Murray agrees with me, it's all about power to weight ratio, and the lighter you make a car, the faster it's going to go in general. And Chapman's philosophy, like most of the engineers of the time, was that providing my car is in perfect condition when it crosses the line to win the race, I don't really care what happens on the slowdown lap, all the wheels can fall off. And obviously at that time there were a number of corners that a lot of engineers cut. Because Chapman was the most innovative and imaginative and creative, he had more failures because he had more limits that he was pushing. I think at the other extreme, you got to give credit to Ron Taranak and Jack Brabham for always trying to design and build cars that were A, reliable, strong, and B, easy to work on and adjust. And that was the other extreme at the time. But if you look at a Brabham today, I remember talking to Dan Gurney about his 64 drive in the Belgian Grand Prix when he was disappeared into the distance in the Brabham. And, you know, he was saying, 165, 170 miles an hour through the Master Kink. You're driving this space frame chassis with fuel both sides of you. You know, you do start to think about things a little bit. And even a Brabham was pretty spindly. And it's not as if other manufacturers didn't have their failures. I mean, talk to Brian Redman about that, driving a Cooper at Spa in 68 and having the left front bottom wishbone break going through Eau Rouge at the top of the hill at Radignan. Lucky to survive that accident. John Cooper actually got very upset with Brian, thinking he had crashed the car, and it was only when Peter Byrne, very good English photographer for Autosport, who I went to a lot of races with, we used to carpool to go to various Grand Prix in the late 70s, and I remember Peter had a Fiat 128 which he drove like a complete maniac everywhere. I remember him thrashing it through the car park at Zeebrugge one night when we were trying to get a ferry. Tire squealing everywhere. He got there anyway. Peter Byrne. Anyway, he got this picture of Brian coming up over the rise, and you can see the bottom wishbone just like that snapping. So yeah, it's for all of Chapman. Sterling Moss obviously had a lot of failures in a Lotus, and famously when there was he had a birthday party in 1960, and they did a cake which was basically a Lotus 18 model in chocolate on the top, and Sterling gets the knife and cuts the left rear wheel off, and that's the slice of cake that he gives to Colin and says, "Here, Colin, this is yours." I don't think Colin thought it was very funny. And but I would say, I'm a Lotus fan. I've got Lotus in my blood, if you like. And so I would always defend Chapman and say, on the other side of the coin, he built these amazing racing cars that did win a lot of races. And they did a lot of racing in those days. Everything was on a shoestring. They didn't have enough mechanics really to do the job at any stage. They were all tired. They were all working all-nighters. That's because there was no money around, and everything was, you only raced next year if you sold all of this year's cars and made a little bit of a profit. It was very tough, and Chapman used to expect his guys, if necessary, to work all-nighters, just like that. Excuse me. So, and I've got two Alans, and they're both incredibly reliable. Yeah, right. I've gone through my ups and downs with Alans. The donuts have broken, the shock absorbers have broken. You know, in the rain, the water pours in through the footwell area, and the electrics all collapse. And at one point, I had an audible rev counter, because every time the windscreen wipers came on, it affected the revs, the noise from the revs of the engine, or the rev counter. It was amazing. Anyway, I won't hear a bad word about Colin Chapman. I think if we all had his philosophy today, lightweight, low center of gravity, low frontal area, guess what? We wouldn't have any SUVs on the road. Isn't that a good thing? That would be much better, wouldn't it? BBWA. Hi, Peter. My wife's Subaru is in danger of me repurposing it as a rally car. Thanks. Well, every time I see one of those Dave Richards Subarus, we always drool at the mouth. Actually, I remember having a chat with David. I can't believe I had this chat. But I remember him, I don't know what the context was, but for some reason it was on the phone. And he was telling me, or asking me, which did I think would be better with the 555 livery, to have the white wheels or the gold wheels? I can't remember what I said to him at the time. But oddly, I can remember having that conversation. But yeah, that was a great car, wasn't it? Subaru. I'm not quite sure about the range of Subarus today. It's like a lot of car companies. They used to build great cars that were brilliant in rallies. And now look at them. What are they doing? Anyway. Andy Lemaire. Hi, Peter. What do you think of the McLaren tactics concerning the tyre swaps? You mean the tyre strategy? You're not allowed to swap tyres, obviously. I think you mean one was on a one-stop, one was on a two-stop. Yeah, I don't think they set out at the start of the race, well, I know they didn't, to say, right, Lando's on a one-stop, you've got the winning strategy, Lando. Oscar's on a two-stop, beat him if you can, Oscar. I don't think it was any of that. I think they both went in with a two-stop strategy. And as I said in the video I did after the race, had Lando not got boxed in at the first corner and got passed by George, and if he'd come out behind Oscar and Charles, I think he would have won that race. Sorry, I think Oscar would have won that race. They both would have been on two-stop strategies. Oscar had the track position, and he would have won that race. He would have undercut Lando at the pit stop. That would have been it. So, 2 pit stops. So, it was all because Lando lost time, and because of that, he kind of lucked into a strategy that won him the race. It didn't work for him at Spa. Not many people are saying, oh, isn't it terrible how McLaren favour Oscar? They always, or favour Lando, because at Spa, Lando had you could say favour Oscar because Lando was on hard tyres on a one-stop strategy and it didn't work. And you could have said then, oh, it's not fair. And now, it hasn't worked for Oscar. They're all saying, oh, it's not fair. So you've got to look at it in a broader brush, I think. And what McLaren are doing is reacting to track position after, the first 5 laps of the race, and looking after their guy on their side of the garage, whether it be Oscar's guys or Lando's guys. They're coming up with a strategy that is best for their driver to try and win the race. And I think that's quite healthy. They're not coming up with a strategy that's best for the team. At the moment, gloves are off and they're both trying to win the race. And that's why Oscar said, give me opportunity of either beating Charles or beating Lando. I want to beat Lando. And as I say, he would have won that race if he had if Lando hadn't got boxed in. And that's happened a lot in racing. It's not just a recent thing. Quite often drivers fall into a strategy that's a sort of, okay, well, that's plan B. We haven't made a very good start. We'll run that. And guess what? The way the race has turned out, he's on a perfect strategy. It might have been a safety car. It could have been anything that gave the win to Lando. But on this occasion, no safety cars. It was just a straight fight, and Lando very good in defence, I thought, late in the race. Give him credit for that. Pickerman. Hi, Peter. First time chatter. Just finished work. Perfect timing. Well, that's good to know, Pickerman. Thank you. Glad. Welcome aboard. Arnan Daz. I think Max and Alonso are better at driving bad cars than Lewis. Just my opinion. I think that's right. But I would say, because I don't think Lewis is... Well, let's look at it. I don't think Lewis really had a bad car in any category in Formula One until 2022. And then he didn't have a bad car. He had a diabolical car that did things that he'd never, ever experienced in his life. Kangaroo hopping down the straight, flick oversteer, no grip, just a complete nightmare of a car. Mercedes absolutely out of their depth with the new technical regulations that came in that year. So it was like from 21, then the whole vortex of Abu Dhabi 21, losing the championship, George is now his new teammate, all these things happened in the winter of 21, not much chance to sort of get the whole thing sorted out in his brain. Then he's back in a car which is by far and away the worst Grand Prix car he's ever driven in his life. So that kind of accounts for how Lewis's driving is today, because he then kind of adapted as best he could after a while, realizing things weren't really going to get much better, and started to change his style a bit and become a little bit more conservative with corner entries and brake in a straight line, make sure he got everything sorted before he even tried to get into the corner. And that's kind of where he is today. He's starting to get a little bit back towards the old Lewis. But with Max had a year or two when the car wasn't capable of winning Grand Prix in Red Bull, engine-wise, and would often be driving beautiful races to finish 4th or 5th. And that was I remember saying, you know, when Max gets a quick car, these are the races that are going to be the making of him. And I think that's one of the reasons he is so good, because he does know what it's like to drive a car that is quite difficult, where you've got to take wing out of it in order to get some decent top speed, and then you're right on the edge on the corners, as he was for a couple of years with Renault. And Alonso, better at driving bad cars. I would say Alonso's better at driving damaged cars. I'm not sure about bad cars. Well, I mean, he is good at driving bad cars. He's good at driving everything, Alonso, but particularly specialistly good at driving damaged cars. You know, if everybody had to have one aspect of the aero taken off their car at the first pit stop, one front wing removed, or a plane off the rear wing, or one of those barge boards or whatever it is, Fernando Alonso would probably win every Grand Prix. Very good. John Perry says, Peter, you're a legend. That's very kind, John. Thank you. Very kind, thank you. Praveen Kumar, thoughts about Leclerc's pace rapidly slowed down in the last stint. What's your take on that? Well, yeah, I mean, obviously he had major problems. And to me, it looked like traction. I was following him most of the race on board, and it looked like the traction was getting worse and worse. And I think he damaged the floor, and I think he lost downforce, and I think he finished where he was going to finish. As I did that thing after the Saturday qualifying in Hungary, where I did the grid as it would have been had it been based on the fastest laps recorded by every driver throughout qualifying, whether it be Q1, Q2, Q3, which is just a fantasy thing, because obviously that isn't how the system works. But I just thought it'd be interesting, bearing in mind how many drivers did not go quicker in Q3. I thought it might be interesting to see what the grid was like. And the grid was, believe it or not, Lando first, Piastri second, George Russell third. The only difference was that Charles was something like 5th or 6th instead of 4th. So if you put aside the anomaly of Q3 and how well he did in Q3, in the back end of Q3, Charles kind of finished where he was always going to finish in that race, easily beating the Aston Martins, but no way he was going to beat George Russell. So, but like the first 20 laps of that race, to me that looked like a Charles Leclerc win. It just looked like he was pacing the race. Oscar was close enough, but not close enough to be worrying him in DRS. Everything was under control. And then it all changed when they brought him in really early, and you thought, what is this? It looked like it was a ruse, and Ferrari fell for it, because McLaren said, Oscar in to undercut Leclerc. And of course he was behind Leclerc at that point, so Ferrari thought, they're going to bring Oscar in, we'll counter that and bring Leclerc in. And that's when it started to go all wrong, didn't they? Put the hards on and the car was just terrible. So, but again, I think that's about where Ferrari were going to be that weekend, really. As distinct from, they had the quickest car, they were on the pole because they had by far and away the quickest car, and then suddenly everything went away halfway through the race. I don't think it was that, if you see what I mean. I think there's another super chat down here. I'm trying to get to the... So we've had one super chat. I did see some colour. What's this one? Yeah, I think it's another super chat from Mike Roakak. Thank you very much, Mike. Peter, how does the pit box work with Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and even Porsche Cup on a single weekend? Sounds really busy. Oh yeah, you're not meaning the pit order, which is based on championships. It's it is busy, and you'd imagine it would never work, but FP1 finishes, Formula One practice finishes, and the teams go back into the garage basically, and there's nothing on the pit apron. All that remains on the pit wall is the stand and all the seats and the computers that they're all looking at. They're all empty, and then on sort of modified golf buggy type things, trailers and little tractors, the F2 boys arrive and girls, and they kind of have deals with teams, and it's usually the same team. So, you know, Dams will, I have no idea what it is, but say Dams will always stop by Haas, for example, and they get to know one another a little bit. And then Dams unload their stuff, and the F2 cars sit in front of the Haas garage at an angle, and the driver's already in the cockpit, and the engineers are starting to go up to the pit wall, and they actually use all the telemetry and the computers and stuff for their cars from the Haas thing. And it works quite well. Same with Porsche, same with F3. And the F1 guys, mechanics, quite like it because they get to know them, they can see what's going on a bit. So yeah, good. Gino Mon, Peter, what are your thoughts about Tim Mayer running for president? Yeah, we've talked about this one. Very good. I think he'd do an excellent job. American Tim Mayer, who is the son of Teddy Mayer, who was one of the original directors and founders of McLaren. Great guy, very good racing brain, and he is the nephew, of course, of Timmy Mayer, who was a very, very good racing driver, drove for Bruce McLaren, who was killed in '64 in a Cooper. And so, because of all that, he's a great guy. No, he is a great guy. He's got a great brain. He's calm, thinks well. I'd love to see it. I mean, it looks to me like he's much too well-rounded and knowledgeable to become president of the FIA. Okay, you know what I mean by that. 5537, woohoo, I'm finally live doing a live stream. More evening streams, please. Yeah, okay. Well, we're looking at the whole live stream business and how we're going to improve it, hopefully. It's a big dilemma in the minds of us YouTube people because it's a global thing, obviously, and it's going out around the world, hopefully. If you look at sort of live chat shows on the radio in whatever country you happen to live, generally speaking, the best time to do it when most people can get involved is sort of the morning period or maybe the drive home afternoon period. But of course, if you then choose to do it in the morning period for the UK, it kind of isolates everybody in other parts of the world. And if you do it in the evening, maybe you don't get the morning UK light. So it's very difficult to know what to do. I mean, the reality is the video sits on the YouTube channel and is watchable on demand after the live stream. So in theory, if I'm doing a live stream in the middle of your night, you can wake up in the morning and you can watch it or even download it if you subscribe to YouTube Premium, which I now do actually. It was very difficult actually subscribing here in Spain. Every time I tried to do it, it says not available in your region. I couldn't work it out. Anyway, one day it did actually work and now I have it. And it's pretty cool being able to download all this stuff from YouTube. I'm not saying my stuff, but movies and sports things that you miss. It's very good. A lot of good films and TV shows on YouTube these days. So that's how so we're thinking about what is the best time to do it. Maybe the best compromise is to do one in the morning, one in the evening, twice a week. Maybe that's the way to do it. And I want to try to be more regular so everybody knows when it's going to be. The morning stream Peter always does it at 11 o'clock Spanish time on a Tuesday, and he always does the evening one at 7 p.m. Spanish time on a Thursday, something like that. That's what I'm kind of looking at doing. Trail Break 3 says, I installed mud flaps on my Bimmer. Yeah, well, as I say, I'm a mud flap guy now, but it's got to look a bit dirty and a bit sort of WRC-ish, isn't it? You can't just put it on a pristine Bimmer, I wouldn't have thought. But anyway, congratulations on doing that, Trail Break 3, excellent. William Valentin, Rivals Rod, Fuji Tevitan. Is Rob Marshall the heir apparent to Adrian Newey's throne when Adrian at some point decides to retire? That's quite a good question, isn't it? I mean, Rob Marshall is a lovely guy, and he was the first engineer that Adrian handpicked when he went to Red Bull. Handpicked him, I think, from Benetton, and now he's at McLaren doing a superb job at McLaren. I think he's a sort of Ross Brawn. I think he's very good at putting together very good people and having an overview of the car, which is slightly different from Adrian, who's just this brilliant creative thinker, aerodynamically and dynamically and stress-wise. He's very good on all aspects of the racing car. We shouldn't forget that about Adrian. He's a chief designer. He's not just an aerodynamicist. Whereas Rob Marshall isn't really an aerodynamicist in the way that Adrian is. It's slightly different, but I think he could certainly be the next Ross Brawn. So, I actually missed that, can't I say? Peter, I'm from Nevers, just next to Manicourt, where the French Formula 1 circuit used to be. In your opinion, how did the circuit rank in terms of racing compared to the newer ones? Oh, great circuit. Lovely circuit, Manicourt, because it had lots of different phases of the lap. Those brilliant S's after the start, super quick S's. So they were as good as high-speed S's as you could possibly have. Then the long straight into the hairpin, great overtaking place because it was pretty wide, and that's where famously Coulthard and Michael had their big race, their battle, which DC won. And then you've got that bit afterwards, very technical, sort of blind brow, change of direction stuff. Then there's a sort of tyre consuming left loop. Then you go up the hill, tightish corner. Then you come down the hill towards the pits. Then they modified the track a little bit there. Yeah, I love Manicourt. Great circuit. Such a shame that we don't race at Manicourt. I don't really understand why. When the French Grand Prix came back on the calendar, it was Ricard that had the money and did it. But Manicourt was always one of the best Grand Prix circuits, and beautiful part of the world too, that beautiful part of France, near the Ligier factory, near the Alain Prost golf course, not that far from Paris. They improved the roads to Manicourt. And I think it was on the calendar when it was, because I think it was supported by the French government when Mitterrand was there. And I think that all went away, obviously, when the government changed. And we don't race there anymore. More's a shame. I've actually raced at Manicourt as well in a Metro European Challenge Cup round. It was before they modified the circuit. Just great track. Loved it. F1 Boy edits. Peter, with the 50% power coming from the electrical side of the engine in 26, will ERS be more powerful and will it play a more crucial role in overtaking next year? Well, yeah, and they've got all this stuff they're going to have, this push to pass stuff, and I don't know. It's all over my head. It's ridiculous to me. But yes, there will be more electrical power and there will be more artificial passing, not only because of that, but also because of the active aero they're having. More overtaking. Got to have more overtaking. William Valentin, Riffles Rod Fuji Tibetan again. Peter, what is your favourite ever Formula 1 circuit and what is your favourite ever Formula 1 race? I can't answer that. There are too many. And I'm too biased in the Dennis Jenkinson way of doing things. It's going to be when one of my close friends won a race on a circuit that we all loved. And I would say, for me, one of the most enjoyable races of all time. And people will think, what is this guy talking about? I would say the 78 Brazilian Grand Prix, when Carlos disappeared into the distance on Michelin's in a T2 Ferrari at Rio. Lovely circuit. I say lovely circuit. I always loved that week. It was 10 days at Rio. How could you not enjoy it? We all went out, tyre testing, stayed at the Sheraton. Everybody was basically at the same hotel, few ringers in other places, but we were basically all at the Sheraton. Great pool near the surf beach. Bit dodgy, so you didn't actually go in after all the dramas that Nigel and Elio had there. Well, Peter Collins and Elio, rescued by Nigel. a few years before that. And you didn't venture far from the Sheraton after the Jonathan Palmer incident when he got mugged or robbed by some taxi driver, I think. But it was just a great week. You know, we were there for the testing, and then it was the Grand Prix, and it was just brilliant. I loved it. And then Carlos just disappeared into the distance. And I would suppose, I don't know, I love the 85 South African Grand Prix as well, when Nigel won his second race in the FW10B, because I love South Africa as well. I love Kyalami, staying at the ranch, and the whole thing was just, it was the old Kyalami then, the old ranch hotel, and just loved that whole thing. I think it was the ranch, or maybe we stayed at the Santon Sun. I think we stayed at the Santon Sun, actually. I think maybe the ranch had closed down by then. We stayed at the Santon Sun. And yeah, South Africa, another great week out there. Nigel winning again, winning really well. Keke drove well, but Nigel drove very well too. And so those, you know, you're asking very personal things. It's going to be races of my friends winning. And I suppose, what else? Wow, I've got a really, I mean, any race at Warwick Farm that Jim Clark won meant more to me than anything else going on in my life at that period. And I saw him win there in 65, 66 and 68. I saw Jimmy win 3 times, and in different cars, the Lotus 32B, the Lotus 39, and then the Lotus 49 in gold leaf colours. And you know, the feeling of going home that night that Jim Clark won the International 100 at Warwick Farm, everything was right with the world. That's how I felt. Warwick Farm, lovely circuit. Very difficult to beat Warwick Farm in my all-time great racetracks. I know it wasn't a World Championship Grand Prix venue, but those Formula 1 cars were actually quicker than, so the Tasman cars at the time were quicker than the Formula 1 cars at the time. But favourite circuits, the original Zandvoort, definitely. Kyalami, for sure. The original Interlagos, loved that one. And Suzuka, some of my favourites. I'm not going to go down to one. It never happened, but thanks for putting me on the spot there. I'm going to have to finish, guys. I know it's annoying, but I have got other stuff going on. I'm going to do another live stream on Thursday, so we can try and, I'm going to try and, as I say, modify the way we do all this stuff so I can get through everybody. Chowdhury, Arshad Zangahir Chowdhury. Will Charles ever leave Ferrari? Do you think his peak years are being wasted by Ferrari's management? Well, I think Lewis's autumn years are being wasted by Ferrari's management, that's for sure. I don't think, I mean, when you think about it, Ferrari have done a lot for Charles. They brought him into Formula 1 and they've got him where he is. So let's keep it in perspective. As I said, we talked about this before. I can't imagine Charles would go anywhere unless it was a surefire bet operation. I mean, if tomorrow a vacancy, for whatever reason, you know, we don't want to go into that, but let's say there was a vacancy at McLaren and Charles was offered the McLaren drive, I think he'd take it, regardless of contract and everything else. He'd be in there like a shot. If he was offered the Mercedes drive, I don't think he'd take it. If he's offered the Red Bull drive, I don't think he'd take it. So you have to weigh up what is better at any given moment. Now, 26, things may well change across the board because the regulations are so different, power unit and chassis wise. And therefore, by the end of 26, there may be a completely different power base in Formula 1. And there may be real opportunities for Charles to go to a team that is on the way up or is already up and they want him. But at the moment, he's better off where he is. And yeah, at the start of the year, don't forget, there was a massive amount of stuff around Lewis. And Charles was kind of in the background, just watching it all and letting it all happen. And what a job he's done against Lewis, if you like. I know Lewis is well below par, but bearing in mind they started as absolute equals. Lewis as a 7 times world champion, Charles yet to win a championship. and Charles has blown him away. I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it, if you think about it? I know all the other Lewis stuff, but Charles, in terms of Ferrari, he's got Ferrari now in the palm of his hand, hasn't he? I mean, Ferrari, for sure, have no doubts about Charles Leclerc. There were moments prior to this when maybe they were a bit fractious. So I'm going to have to wind up there, guys. Sorry about that, partly because I've got to get on, and partly because my throat, as you can tell, is getting worse. And I've got to do another live stream in a few days, and I hopefully want to be 100% for that. So thanks very much for watching, everybody, for being a part of it. It's been a lot of fun, as ever, and I think we can continue a lot of these topics as we go forward into the August break. I'm not going to have an August break. I'm going to keep going. Maybe one road trip to Sevilla we're looking at, which might take a few days, but anyway, I'm sure you'll allow us that, won't you? But in general, I'm going to try and do at least one, if not two, every week. So watch this space. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of it. Take care.